I married Daniel because he made me feel safe. After years of dating men who were unpredictable, emotionally unavailable, or outright destructive, Daniel was a breath of calm air. He was solid, emotionally steady, financially stable, respectful. At first, I mistook that predictability for love. And for a while, it was enough. He was gentle in the way calm waters are after a storm. I was tired of chaos, and I clung to the safety of his steadiness like a life raft. But something shifted over the years. That very calm turned to silence, to emotional distance. We started living like polite roommates instead of lovers. We only spoke about the house, bills, or what groceries were needed. The small touches stopped first, the hand on my back in the kitchen, the kiss on the forehead at bedtime. Then, even the perfunctory gestures began to fade. Our bedroom became a quiet, cold space where neither of us reached for the other anymore. I told myself this was just how marriage evolved. People get older. Life becomes busy. I tried to accept it, to convince myself that love wasn't supposed to burn forever. But deep inside, I knew something in me was drying up. I felt invisible. I began to notice other couples, how they laughed in cafes or touched each other's arms while talking. I wasn't jealous of their wealth or looks. I envied their connection. I had everything society told me I should want: a home, a dependable husband, stability. And yet, I felt like a ghost drifting through my own life. When Daniel's son, Ryan, moved in after a breakup with his girlfriend, I expected it to be awkward. He was 22, finishing college remotely, needing time to get back on his feet. I braced myself for attitude, for tension, but it wasn't like that. Ryan was quiet, respectful, helpful around the house. He didn't just exist in his own world, he noticed things. He asked me how I was. And when I answered, he actually listened. Something Daniel hadn't done in years. At first, it was small. I'd mention how exhausted I felt after work, and Ryan would suggest a new show to watch, or tell me to take a night off cooking and ordering. He'd sit with me during dinner if Daniel was working late, and it felt nice, comforting. There was no intent, no agenda. Just the warmth of being seen. When I wore a new blouse or changed my hair, he noticed. He complimented me in a way that felt sincere, simple. Not flirtatious, just human. Daniel hadn't said a kind word about my appearance in years. One evening, after we'd had leftover takeout, Ryan and I sat at the kitchen table laughing about some absurd meme he'd shown me. I laughed so hard my sides hurt. He smiled and said, "You should laugh more often. It suits you." I felt it then, something unspoken shift between us. It wasn't romantic or sexual. It was deeper than that. I felt alive, seen, recognized. Then came the night that changed everything. Daniel was away at a medical conference out of state. The house was quiet. I got up around midnight to grab some water and passed by Ryan's room. I heard something soft, rhythmic. Curious, I glanced at the door, which was slightly ajar. I didn't mean to look, but I did. Ryan was lying shirtless on his bed, one hand on his phone, the other under the covers. A woman's voice, breathless and unmistakably sexual, came from his speaker. For a moment, I couldn't move. I should have turned away instantly, but I didn't. I just stood there, frozen, watching. Shame hit me like a wave, but not alone. It came entangled with something darker, something I didn't want to name. A hunger I hadn't felt in years stirred inside me, and I hated myself for it. I went back to my room, heart pounding. I sat on the edge of my bed, trembling, not just from what I'd seen, but from how I felt. Not disgusted, not horrified, just awake, as if something buried deep inside had been shaken loose. The next day, I couldn't meet Ryan's eyes. I avoided him as much as possible, but I couldn't stop thinking about that moment. Not the act itself, but what it awoke in me. The scent of his body wash after a shower, the quiet confidence in his voice, the gentle way he looked at me when I spoke. I started dressing differently around the house, just a little mascara, a touch of perfume. I told myself it was for me, but it wasn't. It was for him. For the attention I suddenly craved from the only person who seemed to notice I existed. We never spoke about that night. but a silent thread began pulling tighter between us. The way we lingered a second too long in conversation. The way our eyes held just a moment past what was acceptable. Until one night, it snapped. Daniel and I had another cold, pointless fight. He left for another business trip, and I stayed behind, feeling more alone than I had in years. I sat on the couch, a half-finished glass of wine in my hand, tears staining my face. I wasn't even sure why I was crying. Out of guilt, sadness, or something worse. Anticipation. Ryan came home late and found me there, eyes puffy, silent. He sat beside me without asking. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Then he said quietly, "You saw me that night, didn't you?" I didn't answer. I didn't deny it either. He didn't look ashamed, just quietly understanding. "You haven't looked at me the same since." I wanted to deny everything, to change the subject. But then he reached out and touched my hand. That single touch held more warmth, more intimacy, than anything I had felt in years. My breath caught. "This is wrong," I whispered. He nodded slowly. "Then why are we both still here?" I didn't have an answer. There were no words. What happened next wasn't planned. It wasn't seduction. It wasn't a betrayal of vows in some premeditated sense. It was surrender. Raw and wordless. A desperate attempt to feel alive. We didn't speak. We didn't have to. Years of silence and loneliness crashed into that one moment. And then it was over. We lay there, not touching, not speaking. I stood up and left the room, unable to meet his eyes. I went to the bathroom, stared into the mirror. I didn't recognize the woman looking back at me. But it wasn't guilt I felt, not yet. It was something worse. Relief. Like finally drinking after a long, endless thirst. The next morning, everything felt too normal. I made coffee, ate breakfast in silence. Ryan came into the kitchen and glanced at me with quiet caution. We didn't speak about what happened. We barely spoke at all. The air between us was thick with the unspoken. Days passed. Then weeks. Ryan started spending more time out of the house. Eventually, he told me he was thinking of moving back to his mother's. I didn't argue. I just nodded. When the day came, he paused at the door with his bags, looked at me, and said, "Take care of yourself." Then he left. Now I move through life like nothing happened. I smile when I'm supposed to. I laugh at Daniel's dry jokes. I play the role, but something inside me has cracked open. I keep asking myself, was I just lonely? Or did I trade years of silence for one moment of human truth? I broke something. A marriage. A boundary. Maybe even a part of who I thought I was.